And for winter, we also thought about Bill Clinton. With the Democratic nomination well in hand, he was trying out themes for the general election.
I want to ask you to think for a few moments with me today, not just cheer and shout and bash the president, although that'll be fun and we'll have time for that.
But Clinton didn't have much time, airtime that is, because H. Ross Perot continued to capture the nation's fancy.
Hey, Perot!
With his bandwagon rolling, literally, Perot is our winner of the week. His ballot petitions keep coming in by the box load. And as for the media's efforts to fly-spec his past,
all you want to do is find, if it's all possible, one mosquito somewhere. Well, there are no mosquitoes.
he hasn't been bitten, at least not so far.
Here for a fundraiser for...
Meanwhile, for loser this week, we considered White House Chief of Staff Samuel Skinner. He's under fire for his travel expenses, and when he came to Atlanta for a campaign visit, he didn't want to talk about it.
Have you had an opportunity to comment on this Washington Post story that you reimbursed?
Whoa, 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 careful, careful.
Did you want to
whoa, 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 careful here. Okay, good seeing you. I'll take care. Come on now.
You don't want to comment on that?
No.
No news conference today.
Nice to see you, though.
Sure it was. But our choice for loser this week, Skinner's boss, George Bush. The president's effort to show concern for inner cities took his motorcade down some hard streets he hadn't seen before. At the White House, Bush was late picking up the issue of America's cities, almost a year late, according to one big city mayor.
We have still not met with the President of the United States. Does that tell anybody anything?
And as for the president's photo opportunities, well, it's hard to illustrate the weed and seed program by planting a tree. And there's no explaining a fishing lesson for inner city youth, especially on dry land. The president's made 4 appearances in a week to talk about urban issues. Frankly, he still looks out of place in the inner city. Of course, he's not the only one who's been asleep at the switch. So has the Democratic Congress. But on Saturday, when the nation's mayors march on Washington, you can be sure who the target will be, the man at the top. Catherine.
Thanks, Rick. The run-up to California's presidential primary is shifting into high gear, and next week on this program, the ins and outs of politics in the Golden State. And that's all for this edition of Inside Politics 92. I'm Catherine Crier in Atlanta.
I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Thanks for watching. Lou Waters has a preview of what's coming up next on CNN.
Next on Early Prime Bernie, Michigan doctor Jack Kevorkian helps a 4th woman commit suicide. This time, it's carbon monoxide poisoning. Los Angeles police officer Lawrence Powell is to stand trial again for the beating of Rodney King. The order by a California judge has stirred a flurry of questions about the proceedings. We'll try to provide some of the answers. Also, successful solutions to big city problems. Today, we take a look at how Philadelphia is policing its inner city neighborhoods. Early Prime continues next year on CNN.
Coming up, Early Prime continues, followed by Showbiz Today, after a word from your local cable systems, next on CNN.
Do you realize just how much difference there is in life insurance rates from one insurance company to the next? For instance, if you're in good health and don't smoke cigarettes, Garden State Life Insurance may be able to save you as much as 50% off the cost of your life insurance. That's right. 30, 40, 50% off, what you'd have to pay for a comparable amount of coverage elsewhere. And not just this month, but year after year for the rest of your life. Savings like that are well worth looking into. So if you need $100,000 to $1 million or more of quality term life insurance, you owe it to yourself to get the facts fast by calling now. 800-257-1257, toll-free for this free information package, including a personal coverage proposal that shows you with us directly. You're always just a phone call away. So call today, 800-257-1257, toll-free, 257-1257 for your free personal coverage proposal. No obligation, no pressure. Discover how this quality term life insurance could save you as much as 50% off your premiums every year for the rest of your life. 800-257-1257, toll-free, Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today. 257-1257.
This is CNN.
Reopening the case that tore a city apart, one of the L.A. police officers tried in the Rodney King beating is ordered to stand trial again. A life as wild as the river she reveled in. The legendary river runner who made a career of doing the Grand Canyon in grand style. And the pinnacle of a dancer's dreams. Behind the scenes of the world's famous Bolshoi Ballet. Early Prime continues. I'm Lou Waters. Cheryl Atkinson is on assignment. Also had the Philadelphia story, how the city of brotherly love is trying to live up to its name. Here's what's happening. Another suicide involving the inventor of the so-called suicide machine, Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Kevorkian's attorney says his client was with a seriously ill Michigan woman when she took her own life this morning, but that Kevorkian did not assist in the suicide. Police found Kevorkian at the home of multiple sclerosis victim Susan Williams when her death was reported today. Kevorkian is not under arrest, but he already faces murder charges in connection with the suicides of 2 women last year. Police say Williams was found in her bed wearing a gas mask, which was still pumping a lethal mixture of carbon monoxide and nitrogen. Kevorkian's attorney, Jeffrey Feger, says his client offered the woman counseling after she wrote him expressing a desire to end her life. She was blind and confined to a wheelchair. But Feger says Kevorkian stopped short of actually aiding in the suicide. And at a news conference within the past hour, he said his client plans to end his own life if prosecuted.
Dr. Kevorkian will not cooperate in any further prosecution of him. If he is jailed, he will refuse to eat. He will starve himself in prison. And in effect, you can count on him ending his life in prison if he is in prison for something that is not a crime in this state, that is an act of compassion, reason, and thoroughly medical in nature.
Kevorkian helped an Oregon woman commit suicide 2 years ago, but that charge was dropped when a Michigan judge ruled that state law does not ban physician-assisted suicides. An Atlanta area woman who founded an underground network for abused children was found not guilty today of charges she mistreated 2 of the children herself. Faye Yeager was overjoyed at the acquittal. It took the jury just 3 hours to return not guilty verdicts on all 4 counts against her. Yeager was charged with kidnapping 2 Florida children. She also was accused of bullying the children into accusing their father of sexual abuse and devil worship. Yeager testified the children's mother gave her permission to question the 2 children during their 4-day stay in Atlanta. She says the verdict vindicates her dedication to helping abused children. One of the 4 Los Angeles police officers acquitted in the beating of Rodney King will be back in court. Another trial has been ordered. A judge ruled today that Lawrence Powell must be retried on a charge he used excessive force in the beating of King. The jury acquitted the 4 officers of most of the criminal charges against them late last month, but jurors deadlocked on the charge that Powell used excessive force. The verdicts led to the worst riots in the United States this century. Now, Powell's attorney says he's concerned the riots could affect a retrial.
It's our belief that the public universally regards these trial verdicts as the catalyst in the unrest and the rioting that's occurred across the United States since the last time we were in court on this case. The polls that I'm aware of indicate that persons interviewed almost unanimously expressed the opinion that the verdict was wrong.
The court's function is to adjudicate these types of complaints, be it criminal or civil, and we can't simply throw up our hands and abandon the matter because of widespread public interest.
The judge is considering moving the retrial away from Los Angeles. The head of San Francisco's police department has been fired. Following allegations, he ordered the removal of thousands of copies of a gay newspaper from news racks. The police chief, Richard Hungisto, has been accused of ordering officers to remove the papers because they criticized his leadership. The city's police commission today fired Hungisto after an 8-hour closed-door hearing. Hungisto says he did not order those newspapers removed. A South Carolina man who started walking across America to prove that most people are good was attacked a week into his trip. Fred Turner of Beaufort, South Carolina, says he was robbed by two men Wednesday as he was crossing a bridge in Georgia. Turner says before taking his money and pushing him into a river, the men asked whether he was the guy walking across America. Despite the encounter, Turner says he still believes 99% of Americans are good. Leaders of the African National Congress and the South African government have emerged from a second round of talks empty-handed. Representatives of 19 black and white groups are trying to draft a democratic constitution. Even though today's talks ended in a deadlock, ANC leader Nelson Mandela appears steadfast in his attempt to create a multiracial government. Mandela says he has planned an urgent meeting with President F.W. de Klerk in hopes of getting those negotiations back on track. In Taiwan, anti-nuclear protesters disrupted parliament and then clashed with police. The trouble is tied to a political dispute in Taiwan. The main opposition party accuses the ruling party of taking bribes to approve the country's fourth nuclear power plant. It's alleged the money was paid by the government-run power company. All involved deny the bribery charge. The nuclear power project was revived earlier this year. It had been suspended for 6 years because of environmental concerns. At another parliament building today, not just shouts, but gunfire. This time the political trouble is in the former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan. The dispute is over newly restored President Ayaz Muttalibov. He's a former communist pressured to resign 2 months ago. Yesterday, the parliament put him back in power. Today, armed rebels stormed both the parliament and the presidential palace. In a new bid to oust Muttalibov, his whereabouts still are unknown, and there are reports some members of the Azerbaijani army have sided with the rebels. 20 years ago today, the United States returned the captured island of Okinawa to Japan. It was on condition the U.S. military could keep bases there. At a ceremony marking the anniversary, Vice President Quayle announced the closing of 3 small military facilities on Okinawa. They're a fraction of the U.S. presence on the island, and Japanese critics say it's not enough. Quayle is flying back to the United States after a 4-day visit to Japan. A neighborhood in Philadelphia once had a history of crime, but now things are changing. When we return, we'll tell you what has helped turn things around. We'll also have a report on the death of a whitewater legend. All ahead.